To hear Shirley T from Hueytown, Alabama.
Hi, my name is Shirley T. I'm an alcoholic. I'm really grateful to be here. I want to thank the committee for inviting my little Al-Anon to come along, and he's going to share Saturday morning. So if you want to hear rebuttal, you come on back here Saturday morning. There's also someone here, too, that's real special to me. I have an aunt and uncle who have been married 43 years, and they have loved me through all the bad times of my alcoholism, and they still love me today. And they came all the way from Silver Spring this morning to stay tonight just so they could hear my story. And I hope they still love me after I get through. And I'm real grateful to have them here with me tonight. Well, let's see, the only way I know how to describe my husband is he's my driver. He drove me to drinking. He drove me to treatment. And he drives me to an awful lot of AA meetings. And would you stand, Bo? I want them to not be able to miss you. This man is also my best friend. And there was a time when we weren't best friends. My sobriety date is July the 29th, 1982. And I don't tell you that to impress you. I tell you that because I am so proud of that. And I am 50 years old. My stepdad told me a couple of weeks ago, he said, you know, if you planned to live to 100, honey, your life is half over. And I thought, I don't understand that. But I'm 50. And I know if I had not found this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I would not be alive today. The big book says I share with you what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And I'm the oldest of 3 children. I have a brother that's 4 years younger than I am, and he's not an alcoholic. He's a normal person. I have a sister that's 8 years younger than I am, and she's somewhere in Tennessee tonight working on her story. There are a lot of prayers going out for Gail, and it would be so neat to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in some state or some small town or somewhere and run into Gail. And, you know, I hope and pray that one of these days I do run into her in this program. When I was 13 years old, my parents divorced, and we thought we got the problem out of the house. My daddy does not claim to have a drinking problem, nor will I tell you he's an alcoholic. But for 13 years, I lived in active alcoholism, I know today. My mom said that they were divorcing and we were moving in with my grandmother and my granddaddy. And it tickled me to death because I was the oldest grandchild in my family. And my granddaddy called me Peaches. And he would do things with me. And when my mother said we were moving in with Granny and Granddaddy, it just tickled me to death. You see, my grandmother led the GA group at her church, and she taught Sunday school. And my granny was going to take me to church with her and teach me how to be a little lady, because my mom didn't really know how to do that at that time. This sister of mine had polio when she was 3 years old, and a lot of my mom's time was spent with this sister of mine who had 11 major operations over the next 11 years of her life. So we moved in with Granny and Granddaddy. Tickled me to death. We moved in the summer of that year, and in September I started to high school. I had a whole new set of friends, went to a different school, lived in a different neighborhood, and for some reason I felt like I was going to be okay. My grandmother made every stitch of clothing that I wore, and I didn't appreciate it back then. But I certainly do appreciate it today. I can remember times of her sitting by the stove and sewing a dress for me, putting the hem in it, and her hands would bleed. But she was determined that her granddaughter would have a new dress to wear to school the next day. The first Christmas at these grandparents' home was the best Christmas I ever had. I was 14 years old. And for once, my mom did not cry all day on Christmas. My dad was not there. He did not fall in the Christmas tree. And my brother and sister and I had more presents than we'd ever had to open. The following January, just a few months, well, in January, this granny of mine suddenly became ill. And by the end of January, she died. And I did not understand that. I understood why my daddy was no longer in the picture, but please tell me who was going to raise me to be a little lady without my granny. Being a parent today as I am, I know that my granddaddy sat my mom down in the kitchen at the table and said, "Louise, if you're going to live in my home, honey, you need to get a job." And my mom said, "If I've got to get a job, Dad, I'll just move out." So we did. We moved out into an apartment, and my mom got a job, the only thing she could find, working the night shift. With this came the responsibility. My mom and I switched roles. I became the mom. She sort of became the daughter, because when she came in from work at night, we were always in bed asleep. When we got up to go to school the next morning, she was always in bed asleep. And it was left up to me to get home from high school and make sure that my brother and sister had something for dinner, and that they had clean blue jeans for school, and that they got their homework. And dating was never an issue. It just wasn't something that was, talked about an awful lot. I know that I missed a lot of things by coming straight home from school, because I missed football games and pep rallies, and though I had to just come straight home from school to watch after this brother and sister. And one day at school, a girlfriend said, "I've got a date with a fellow that's going to drive up from Bessemer," and I was from Birmingham at that time, and it's just that far on the map, 17 miles. And she said, "Do you think your mother would let you go out on a double date with me Saturday night with these two fellows?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'll just have to ask her." And I can remember going to my mom and saying, "Would it be all right, Mom, if I go on a blind date, a double date with Margaret and two fellows from Bessemer Saturday night, and let's go skating?" And she said, "Well, yeah, that'd be all right, but nothing ever happens on a blind date. And if you stick around until Saturday morning, you're going to hear my blind date." I think on my part it was, keep up with me now. My mom told me that before I left for this date, that I was not to kiss him goodnight when he walked me to the door. Good girls didn't do that. So I thought, well, what will I do? And when I was introduced to Bo, there was just a spark. There was I don't know, it's like chills running up your spine, and I had goosebumps all over, and for me it was love at first sight. And this past April the 30th, we celebrated anniversary number 30. I don't remember all of these 30 years, but he does, every single one of them. So when he walked me to the door that night, he tried to kiss me, and I remembered what my mom had said. So I didn't let him kiss me. And when I came in, my mom was ironing. I said, "Oh, Mom, I loved him." I said, "There was just something about his smile." And she said, "Well, did you kiss him goodnight?" And I said, "No, ma'am, you told me not to." And she said, "Well, he probably won't call you back anyway." And I said, "Well, then why couldn't I kiss him goodnight?" So she finished ironing, and I cried myself to sleep. And the next afternoon when he got in from church, he called me, and I've learned a couple of things in this program, I hope, and one of them is a little bit of honesty. And he called and asked me for a date that Sunday night, and I have to tell you that before we got to the driveway, I let him kiss me, and he's been kissing me ever since. We dated for 5 years, and during this time, his parents divorced. So here we were, two young people madly in love, ready to tackle the world. And we knew we'd be okay because we had that little tiny flicker. We had that thing called love. And let me tell you, all through the active alcoholism and through everything we've been through together in 30 years, plus 5, our love has been like a little pilot light on a gas stove. It has never gone out. Now, there have been a lot of times when the eyes were not on, an awful lot of the times. But there's never been one time that pilot light has ever gone out. And then when we got to you people, and you taught us how to love each other once more, we were able to put this relationship back. And I'd like to tell you that tonight, September the 7th, those eyes are completely just as wide open as they can get. And I'm truly married to my very best friend because of this program of Alcoholics Anonymous. When we set the date to get married, this is how crazy I was. I had been reading these brides magazines and all these things on how you walk down the aisle on the arm of your daddy in the long white dress with a long white veil. And I wanted that. So I called my daddy. My daddy was not the kind of person who believed in child support. My daddy did not believe in alimony. My daddy did not believe in birthday presents or Christmas presents because, you see, there was something else just a little bit more important in his life, and that was a drink. I had not seen this man since the divorce papers were signed, but the thing I thought about doing at this time was to call my daddy and tell him I was getting married on April the 30th, and would he come and walk me down the aisle. I looked his telephone number up in the telephone book, and I picked up the phone and I called him, and I should have known when he answered that there was that same slur about his speech. But you see, I was planning my wedding, and I wanted him to be a part of it, and I didn't recognize it. I told my dad I was getting married to the man of my dreams, and would he come and walk me down the aisle? And he said, "Why, sure I will." And I can almost hear it today. He said, "What time is the wedding? What do I wear? And where's the church?" And you know, I told him exactly how to get there. And we got to the church on Thursday night, and we had the candles all lit, and the organ music was playing, and everyone had been seated. And my mom was standing at the back of the church with me, and she had this look on her face that said, "Shirley, he's not going to show up. Why did you believe one more time that he's going to show up?" And I just had this false hope. My brother had just finished lighting all the candles, and he came to the back of the church, and, you know, he had that look about, "Where's Daddy?" And I thought, what in this world am I going to do? About that time, someone had been standing outside, I think, smoking a cigarette, and they came back in the church and said, "Man, somebody's pulled up on the sidewalk." And I said, "He's here." Man, he's made it. You know, he's a little nervous, but he's here. And it was my daddy in all of his glory. And he flung open those two big double doors of that church, and he walked in, and he had that natural glow about him. And he had those red, bloodshot eyes. And he took one look at me, and he took one look at my mother, and he turned around and walked out. And I thought, I am not believing this. Not on my wedding day. Please tell me that this is not happening. And my brother walked over about that time, and he said, "Oh, come on. Pull that veil down over your face. I'll walk you down the aisle. I've been trying to get rid of you for years." And this brother of mine today takes credit for this wedding, this marriage lasting 30 years, and I let him. I just let him, because he's one of those normal people, and that's okay. But we left the church that night, and we started on something that brought us here to you. We started on a thing called the Great American Dream, and it has truly been a journey. We had a lot of goals that we wanted to accomplish together. We had a lot of things we wanted to do together. We wanted a family. We wanted a home. We both had good jobs, and the first thing we did was we saved up enough money for that first down payment on that little house out in Hueytown. And on our second wedding anniversary, no children yet. And on our third wedding anniversary, no children yet. But I got a little two-door red Thunderbird for our wedding anniversary, and I thought I was hot stuff. Now, I thought I was something else, riding down the road in that little two-door red Thunderbird. And one day on the way home from work, a man hit me. Just, you know, didn't do a lot of damage, just scraped it down the side. And I pulled in the driveway and told Bo, and he said, "Well, I think you need to go to the doctor." And I said, "I'm fine." I didn't really think I needed to call the police, but I did call them just to make sure that everything was okay. And he said, well, you just don't want to wake up one morning next week or 6 months down the road and have a whiplash. So I would feel better if you just go to the doctor and you get yourself checked over. So the next morning I called the doctor and made an appointment, and I went in there, and this doctor checked me over from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. And he looked at me and he said, now when you get dressed, I want you to go in my office and wait on me, and I'll be in there to talk to you. And I thought, he's found something wrong with me. And you know, I feel better than I have in months. So I went on in his office and sat down, and he came in a few minutes later, and instead of going over and sitting on the other side of his desk, he pulled a chair up beside me. And he sat down beside me, and he tapped me on the knee, and he said, Shirley, you're 2 months pregnant. I said, from the wreck? And the only thing I could think to say was, what will I tell Bo? He said, get him on the phone. So I picked up the phone and I called Bo, and he worked at a Ford parts dealership then, and you know, it's sort of like an AA meeting. They stand around with a cup of coffee in their hand, and I know they sell a lot of parts, but every time I've ever walked in, they've had a good time. And I get Bo on the phone, and I hand the phone to this doctor, and he says, Bo, I have Shirley in my office, and she's 2 months pregnant. You can hear Bo, from the wreck? Well, let me tell you about that little wreck. His name is Mike, and he was born November the 10th of that year, 1967, and he was named after this uncle of mine down here and my uncle's son, Mike. And this was a little blonde-headed, blue-eyed hunk that was to become the sunshine of my life. I had another wreck. Her name is Sissy, and she was born 17 months later, and she's brown-headed and brown-eyed, and I want to tell you about Sissy right now. Sissy is 25 years old today, and Sissy was to come with us to Ocean City this week. She's been planning it for months and months and months. In fact, she was going to chair the meeting that her daddy was going to speak on Saturday morning. And she had applied to graduate school some time back, and 6 weeks or 8 weeks ago, the school called and said, you have been accepted into graduate school. And she works with alcoholics and drug addicts. And that little girl was 13 years old when I got sober. And she came into a fellowship called Alateen. And I wish I could take just a little bit of credit, just a tiny bit of credit, for what my daughter has become. But I owe everything that young lady is to Alateen. They taught her in there that she was somebody special, and that she was not the reason that her mother was an alcoholic. You see, I was the reason. I told her that she was the reason I drank so much. And that little girl in her junior year in high school contemplated suicide. And I found that out when I had been sober 2 years. She stayed in Alateen until she was 20. And she came to us when she was a senior in high school, and she said, Mom, I want to go to college. And I had drank up college. I had drank up everything. And this little girl said, but Mom, I want to go to college because, you see, I want to go and learn how to help families of alcoholics. Mike said, I'll help you send her through school. And so she went to college. She graduated. The first job offer that she had was working the evening shift in a hospital-based treatment center. And she almost turned it down because by this time she was the Alateen sponsor in the group that she grew up in. And she did not want to give up her Alateen. But with her dad's urging and with mine, we tried to convince her that she needed to be self-supporting through her own contributions. And she took this job, and now she's in graduate school, and I've made a deal with her that when she graduates, I'm going to quit and let her support me for 26 years. That's how I work my program. But she is a beautiful young lady, and I am so sorry that you missed meeting her this weekend. But she is in school right now, even as we speak. Well, let's see. We had Mike and Sissy, and that's all the variety they had. So I didn't have any more kids. One boy and one girl. And we were living this great American dream, and you know it takes 2 paychecks. So after Sissy was about 6 months old, I went back to work. And I found a real good babysitter. I found a lady who was to love my children and teach my children things over the next number of years that their own mother was not capable of teaching them. I went back to work, and at lunch one day, a group of girls said they belonged to a social sorority and they needed a new member, and would I like to become a member? And if you remember, see, I couldn't do things like that in high school because I had to rush home and watch after a brother and sister. So when these girls asked me to join, I joined. And one night on the Warrior River in the summer, at my first party, it was a dance, and it was at a lady's place down on the lake, on the river. They had a live band. They had an open bar. My children were tucked away safely with a babysitter for the evening at home. And my husband and I went to this party. I had never had a drink of alcohol in my hand, much less in my mouth. And during this dance, with the moon reflecting over the Warrior River, my husband walked up to me and handed me a Tom Collins and said, "Here, honey, drink this." Now, I am an alcoholic who remembers her last drink, and I definitely remember my first. And I want to tell you what it looked like. It was in a real tall glass. It was colored pink. It had a straw in it. It had a toothpick across the top that had a maraschino cherry with a stem, a wedge of pineapple, and a slice of orange. In the bottom of this glass that was oh so tall was a little tiny umbrella. And I drank it all, every bit of it, including the umbrella. And it opened up. And Shirley was to become a different person from that day on. Now, I didn't get in trouble overnight. And I want to tell you what kind of an alcoholic I am. I never went to bars. I've never run around on Bo. I've never been in jail. I've never had a DUI. But let me tell you that my bottom for me was just as bad as any gal who's ever walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I hit my bottom, I had nowhere else to go but up. And all I did was drink in my kitchen on 28th Avenue, in my kitchen alone, until it was time to pass out. I am also a winette. All of you guys who drink wine are winos. And I think it sounds just a little nicer to call me a winette. And I drank the pink Chablis, and I'll tell you why I drank the pink Chablis. Because at that time, it was $3.17 a bottle, and my son usually had that much money in his front blue jeans pocket. Or that's about how much money my little girl had put in her piggy bank, that I could take a knife and slide up and get that much money out and go buy me another bottle of wine. You know, I drank in my kitchen from 4:31 in the afternoon until whatever time I passed out. And I could not be an alcoholic, you see, because I slept in the same bed with Bo. My children went to school every day, and I worked every day. My daddy had a drinking problem. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't remember when Mike's bedroom door started being locked. It used to drive me crazy, but today it is not important. All I know is that when I would get these 2 children up for school the next morning, Mike's door would be locked and I couldn't get in there. I'd have to knock on the door. I would go to Cissy's bedroom and it would be closed, but it wouldn't be locked. I would go over to her and I would shake her to wake her up, and her pillowcases would always be wet. And I never once asked her why. I just rationalized in my mind that, yeah, I kind of went to bed a little early the night before, and I know she took a shower, and I know she washed her hair, but she didn't dry it. And what I'm going to have to do one morning when she wakes up with a sore throat is that I'm going to have to take off work, take her to the doctor, and I won't get paid, and I won't get to drink as much. And when I went into treatment, this little girl who was 13 years old sat across the room from me, and she said, "Mother, I have cried myself to sleep over you every night for so long because I thought I was the reason that you drank." And I had been sober 2 years when Mike came up to me and he said, "Mom, the reason my bedroom door was always locked was because I didn't think little boys were supposed to cry. And you see, Mom, I cried myself to sleep over you every night because I thought I was the reason that you drank." I drank this pink Chablis, and I put it in a real pretty wine decanter on the left side of my refrigerator. Mike and Cece loved strawberry Kool-Aid, and I kept it on the right side of my refrigerator in a white Tupperware pitcher. And I was real quick to tell Mike and Cece, "Your Kool-Aid is on the right-hand side of the refrigerator. Mother's Kool-Aid is on the left-hand side." And to this very day, that 25-year-old daughter of mine will not touch Kool-Aid. And that is the tiniest scar that my alcoholism put on that child. She will not touch Kool-Aid. If she goes anywhere and they're serving Kool-Aid, she will ask for a glass of water. And I didn't hurt anybody when I was drinking. I woke up one morning, came to one morning, and I looked in this mirror in the bathroom, and I didn't like the person I had become. It absolutely scared me to death. And I looked in this mirror and I said, "You know, God, I don't remember the last time that Bo put his arms around me and he said, 'I love you.' I said, 'You know, God, I just can't imagine. I don't remember the last time Mike said, 'Mom, you smell so good.'" And then I looked in this mirror and I said, "You know, God, I don't remember the last time Cece complimented me on something I did special for her." And when I looked back in this mirror, this little voice said, "Hey, Shirley, when was the last time you put your arms around Bo and you told him that you loved him? Hey, Shirley, when was the last time you put your arms around Mike and you told him he smelled good? Shirley, when was the last time you brushed your daughter's long blonde hair instead of sending her across the street to Bonnie's house because you were too drunk to brush it? But you asked me if I had a problem? No way. I did not have a problem." Bo came in from work one afternoon in his pickup truck, and he had a motorcycle in the back of it. And I said, who does that belong to?" And he said, "It's Mike's." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, when I was 14, my daddy bought me a motorcycle. And I want my son to have a motorcycle." And I can't tell you the nights that little fella would get on that motorcycle as soon as he came in from school. And he wouldn't come home until he knew his mother was drunk and passed out. And you see, I never bothered anybody. I just drank in my kitchen alone on 28th Avenue. And I didn't bother a soul. When I met Bo, he was playing softball, and we spent an awful lot of dates at the ball field, and he was a fast-pitch softball pitcher. And when Mike and Cece came along, guess what? They played ball too. And it was really neat on a lot of nights to have all three of those family members playing ball. And this was before the drinking really got bad, and before I could not remember to wash all the ball uniforms. And I can remember the first time Cece said, "Mom, none of the mothers are going tonight, just the dads." And I kind of knew what she meant. And Mike said to me, "Mom, just come on home from work. Don't bother to come by the ball field. Dad'll pick me up." And I kind of knew what he meant by that. He would say, you know, Mom, I'm not the best ball player on the team. And Sissy would say, you always embarrass me, Mom. And then there was Bo, who played ball every Wednesday night, and finally he said, Shirley, just don't come to the games anymore. You cannot remember to turn off the headlights when you get there. And he said, we have to call time. We have to get somebody to come over and wake you up and get the car lights turned off. And it's just not worth it. Just stay at home and do whatever it is that you do. So I quit going. I didn't need them anymore. One night in July of 1982, these family members were going to one more ball game. And as they hit the front door, Mike, who was 15, about a half of a head taller than me, turned around and he looked at me and he said, Mom, when we get home tonight, are you going to be passed out on the floor? Or are you going to be passed out in bed? And he didn't say it sarcastically. He just made a statement. And for the very first time in his life, I wanted to slap his teeth out. I wanted to yank him up and tell him, young man, you showed me just a little bit of respect. Don't you dare talk to your mother that way. And you know, he didn't wait for an answer. And you see, many, many, many years ago, one of the nights when my dad was spanking me with a belt buckle into the belt, I said, God, if you'll let me have kids, I'll never lay a hand on them. And I never have. I have never spanked either one of my children. And I know that night, if I had ever laid a hand on Mike, I might have killed him. Because you see, he had no right to look at his drunken mother and make that remark. Well, they left. They got in the car, and as soon as the headlights pulled out of my driveway, guess what I went and did? You call this disease insanity? I went right straight to the kitchen and I poured me another glass of wine because my son had just humiliated me, and the only way I knew to get rid of the pain was to take one more drink. They came in that night, and during the time they were gone, I know the TV was not on. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that TV was not on. But when I came back through the living room to close the front door, there was a telephone number on the screen. And with my telephone in this hand and my wine in this hand, I called a treatment center. And let me tell you right now, if you're new in this program, a treatment center is not a prerequisite for making it in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I had drank for so long, and I was so anesthetized. I had my days and nights confused. I didn't eat anymore. I did not know what it was like to sit down and eat. All I knew how to do was to drink. And I don't believe that this old gal would have made it had I not gone into treatment. But you can make it without going into treatment. I called this treatment center, and this lady answered, and I told her that my girlfriend had a drinking problem. And she said, why don't you wait until in the morning, Shirley, and we'll admit you in the morning. And you know, I felt so good because I had finally made a decision to do something about my drinking, whether I was in full denial or not. And when Bo and Mike and Cece came in from the ballgame that night, I was up. I wasn't passed out on the floor. I was determined that Mike was not going to see me passed out on the floor. They hit the front door, and Mike said, oh, you're up. And he went to his bedroom and closed the door, and I heard that lock. It was like an ice pick. One more time. Cece walked by, and she said, oh, Mom, you're up. And I said, yes, I'm up. I've got to tell you something. And she said, tell me in the morning. And she went to her bedroom, and she closed that door. And old Bo walked in. And I said, Bo, I've called a treatment center. I've got to have some help with my drinking. And he looked at me, and he said, this is number 1,382. What's different? And he went to bed. And for the first time in my life, I was serious. How many times had I told him, get me out of this one. Get the family off of me. Pick up my bad checks. Just get me out of this scrape one more time, and I won't drink anymore. And I had run out of road I'd hit a dead end. So we went to bed that night, and the next morning about 10 o'clock, the phone on my desk rang, and it was Bo, and he was crying. He said, "You really did call a treatment center, didn't you?" And I said, "I've got to have some help." Let me tell you that this was the first time that we had talked on the phone since Valentine's Day. And I want to tell you what I did on Valentine's Day of 1982. My husband sent me 3 long-stem red roses. One from him, one from Mike, and one from Sissy. And I called my husband and said, "If you can't send a dozen, don't send any." And that's the remark I made that night with Joyce when I said I'd give anything in this world if I had 3 long-stem red roses, one from Mike, one from Bo, and one from Sissy. You see, it's taken me 12 years in this program. I get 1 rose for each year of sobriety. And this past July the 29th, I got a dozen roses. Well, I wish I could tell you that I went into this treatment center and that I stayed the 28 days and that I came home and we picked up this great American dream and we've lived happily ever after. I wish that I could tell you that I was told early on in this program that if I would do what was expected of me, that I would live happily ever after. I didn't hear that. I didn't read that in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. What I was taught was that if I would get in this program and work these steps to the best of my ability with a sponsor and stay active in this program, that my life would change. And I told my counselor at this treatment center that I needed to get my family back together before I started going to all these meetings. And she looked at me and she said, "Shirley, if you put your sobriety first, everything else in your life will fall into place." But you see, I wanted it all right then. I wanted the love and respect back of these 2 kids that I had completely taken away their growing up years. I wanted the love and respect back of this man that I had vowed to love till death do us part. But it was a slow process. They told me that I needed to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, and we did. We did. There were not a lot of meetings at Bessemer, and I'm from an old group. We're 46 years old. I'm 50 years old. Honey, they got kicked off real early waiting on this old girl. And I love being a member of an old group. There's a lot of good sobriety in that group. I thought I would walk into these meetings and I would be the only female. And some nights at Bessemer, we women outnumber you men. And I think that's awesome. But we started on this journey, and they told us to get involved, both of us, for Bo to get involved in Al-Anon, and these 2 children of ours who were 13 and 15 to go to a fellowship called Alateen. We asked Mike and Sissy to go to 4 meetings, 1 a week, and at the end of that 4 weeks we would talk. Well, I've told you about Sissy. She fell for it hook, line, and sinker, and she is the most beautiful young lady, and she's mine. She's the little girl that I used to tell couldn't fold clothes right because she's left-handed. And anytime she would fold the towels for the linen closet, I would open them up and pull them all out because they weren't folded the way I thought they should be folded. This is the little girl who would load the dishwasher, and she put the cups and glasses in left-sided to my right-handed. And I would tell her, if you can't load the dishwasher right, just leave it alone. And I didn't have a problem. But we asked these kids to go to Alateen, and Mike went for the 4 weeks. And he had this motorcycle, and he was blonde-headed, and he was good-looking. And he had some chasing to do, and we think he had some catching to do. And so he said he would support me in my recovery. And anytime we went to the beach, to the conventions, he'd go. He could scope out all the girls on the beach. And anytime I got a chip, he was going to be there to see me get my chip. I had been sober 15 months. And I'd lost my job while I was in treatment because I was out 38 days. And I believe it was God saying to me, Shirley, make some memories. You know, you don't have any good memories with these two children that you brought into this world. And so for 15 months I didn't work, and I made a few memories. And I can remember my mom calling me one night, and she said that she had been to the doctor, and she had had some tests run, and that she was going to have to go on the kidney dialysis machine if she was going to live. And you know, she said to me, I don't want to hook up to a machine for the rest of my life. And I can remember telling her at 15 months sober, Mom, I can't take a drink one day at a time. I'll help you if you'll help me. This is the mother that I called one night drunk. And I begged her to let me come live with her. My mom said to me, Shirley, of my 3 kids, you're the sorriest. Mike and Cece deserve a better mother than what they've got. And I wouldn't count on you if you were the only kid I had to count on. And my mom hung up on me. Now she's calling me and telling me that she is to hook up to a machine which will save her life. And she's to hook up to this machine 2 nights a week, Monday night and Friday night. And I want to tell you that every time that little lady hooked up to that machine, I was there. If we were going out of town for the weekend, we waited until her dialysis and we left from the hospital after she came off that machine. I was told early on by a lady in this program who adopted me, I certainly did not adopt her, that what I needed to do was make some amends to my mom. And I said, my mom needs to make some amends to me. She said, Shirley, this program doesn't work like that. Every Monday night and Monday night and Friday night, I went to Norwood Clinic. And I sat there while my mom was hooked up to this machine, which was to save her life. And I can remember a lot of times I would walk in and my mom would say, Shirley, do you see that lady over there on that 3rd chair? And I'd say, yes, ma'am, she's crying. And she'd say, I want you to go over and talk to her because her grandson came home drunk last night. And I'd say, Mother, I'm not up here drumming up business for AA. And she would say, but I'm so proud of you. Well, I had been sober in this program almost 5 years. And this mother of mine said, I would like to give you your 5-year medallion. Do you think your group would let me do that? I said, I think so. So we started making plans for us to have a party for my 5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. One night at treatment, at dialysis, I was rubbing my mom's legs. And they had told me that when she went on the machine 3 days a week, that it would not be long before I would lose her. My mom and I had shared a lot of things while she was on this machine. We'd shared a lot. And one night she said to me, Shirley, of my 3 kids, honey, you've turned out to be the best. Mike and Cece couldn't have a better mother if they searched the whole world over. And Shirley, of my 3 kids, you're the only one that has stood by me through all these treatments. And I love you. My mom made an amends to me because of a program called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I almost missed it. June the 24th, she died. Before my AA birthday, July the 29th. And I lost the very best girlfriend I ever had. My daughter gave me my chip that night at the club, and she got up there and she said, my granny was supposed to do this tonight, but she had a date with God. And you know, God just won't wait. and my granny had to go. And I looked at the back of the room, and there was Mike. He had a date that night, but he had taken his date home so he could come and see me get my 5-year chip. And he came up to me and he said, "Mom, you're 5 and I'm 20. Now, do you want me to slow up just a little bit? Or do you want to speed up?" And I said, "I'll pedal a little bit faster." And my mom's death hurt Mike an awful lot. He was the only grandson with 8 granddaughters. And I can remember him saying to me at the funeral, "Mom, if anything should ever happen to you, I just have to go with you. I love you that much." And I said to him, "Don't say anything until you've been in those shoes." My last year of drinking, this little fella got on this motorcycle, you see, and would go and stay off till 10 o'clock at night. And he flunked this last year of junior high. This year in junior high, that was my last year of drinking. Now, I was to come home from treatment and stay home 15 months and watch this son of mine have to repeat a year that was my fault. And I was home. I could not look him in the face. I could not face him eyeball to eyeball because, you see, I had taken away 1 year of his life. And I can remember the morning after Labor Day, him getting up to go to school, and he came over to me and he said, "Mom, it's no big deal. I'll just go and repeat this year, and I'll just graduate 1 year later. No problem." And I can remember so many mornings of crying and saying, "Mike, I'm so sorry that the environment around this house was not where you could stay at home at night and live." And I can remember one morning at school, he called me from school and he said, "You know, Mom, I just finished one of my classes, and if I hadn't been repeating this year, I wouldn't have met Sherry." And then one day he came home from lunch to have lunch with me, and he says, "You know, Mom, I just got to tell you 3 things, Mom." And he closed his bedroom door. I sat down on his bed, and he said, "Mom, number 1, I want to tell you how grateful I am that you're sober. Have you ever been thanked by one of your kids for not drinking? You're missing out on a treat." And I thought of the promises in the big book, and I thought they won't ever happen to me because I'm young. And then Mike looked at me and he said, "I want to tell you something, Mom, number 2. For a long time, you and I have had this glass wall up between us. You blame yourself for this year that I flunked." He said, "That's not so." He said, "Mom, if you will remember, Sissy made the honor roll that year. There was no reason in the world why I couldn't have passed. I used your drinking as an excuse, Mom, and I flunked myself." He said, "In a few minutes, I'm going to that stadium, and I'm going to get that diploma 1 year later than I was supposed to. And when I get that diploma and I walk across that platform, I'm going to look right straight at you, and I'm going to put up thumbs up. And, Mom, there's not ever to be another word breathed or mentioned about this year that I flunked. Is that clear?" And I just nearly lost it. You know, I just thought there's no way that number 3 can be better than this number 2. And he looked at me and he said, "Now, number 3, no matter how many little girls I date, Mom, you will always be my number 1 girl." Well, I didn't know what to do. I honestly did not know what to do. So I stood up, and he came over, and he put his arms around me, and we stood there, and we cried, and I want to tell you that the glass wall went down. It went completely down, all because of a program called Alcoholics Anonymous and Alateen. My son did not go to a lot of meetings, but my son had a program. I guarantee you. Well, the next year, Sissy graduated, and she didn't call me into her bedroom, and I was kind of disappointed. But see, she got an Alateen, and we had our little session 7 months into my sobriety when she came home from an Alateen meeting one night, and she said, Mom, I need to have a talk with you. And I said, okay. And she said, no, I need to have a talk with you, Mom. My sponsor says if I'm ever going to get any better, I got to get rid of the garbage. And so for 2 hours, we sat on her big canopy bed with the door closed and locked. And she had a legal pad full of things that I had said to her, that I had called her, and that I had done to her when I was drinking. And I would say 98% of them were things I had done in blackouts. I did not remember any of the things that she read for 2 hours from that piece of paper. And when she got through with it, I said, Cece, I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. And she said, Mom, that's all you have to say. It'll never be brought up again. And it's never been brought up again. That's what Alateen did for my child. You know, this thing with my mom dying and Mike telling me that if anything should happen to me, that he wouldn't want to live again. We were ready to move Sissy back home from school in May of '88, and Mike just insisted on moving her back home himself. He had a couple of friends with pickup trucks, and Montevallo wasn't but 40 miles, and thank goodness it wasn't long distance. And he said, Mom, let me move her back home, and you and Dad just stay here for the weekend. It won't take us that many trips. And it tickled Cece to death because she said, you know, there's just not many brothers that would take a weekend and move their sister back home from school. But we found out that he was down there checking out all the girls on her dorm floor. And I said something to him about, you know, I think it's real commendable for you to take the time to go pick up your sister and bring her back home. And he said, Mom, there's a book that you read called Alcoholics Anonymous. And in there's a sentence that says, be willing to go to any length to get it. One of the Father's Day, after I was sober, I called my stepdad, Pete, and I said, I don't want to give you a shirt. I don't want to give you something that's going to be put in a closet. Is there anything at all that you can think of that I can give you that you would like to have? And he said, well, yes, there is. I said, you name it, and you've got it. And he said, well, I'd like to know if I could have one of those copies of the big book that you read. And I said, you mean Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous? He said, yes. I said, why in the world would you want a copy of the big book? And he said, well, when your mom got sick, I read every pamphlet, every book, everything that any doctor would give me on her condition. And you tell me that you have a disease. And if you have a disease, I want to read that book that describes your disease. He said, are they very expensive? I said, I think we can afford one. So we bought Pete a big book, and we put a little inscription in it, and a couple of days later, the phone rang, and he said, let me talk to Bo. And I said, well, is there something I can help you with? He said, well, yeah, I'm in the big book, and I'm on page so-and-so, and I need to ask Bo. I said, I'm the alcoholic. You asked me. He said, no, I want to talk to Bo. Well, after my mom died, and there were some things that he especially wanted me to have of hers, we went up to his house, and when I walked in, he said, young lady, you can have anything in this house that belongs to your mom, but you are not to touch my big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Mike was moving Sissy home this weekend in May of '88, and we were to go on vacation this summer to this aunt and uncle's. We were going on the Amtrak, and we were to go up for a 2-week stay at their home. And on Tuesday night, after Cece moved home from college that weekend, I went to my meeting as usual at Bessemer. And when I came home, our lives were to change, and they've never been the same. At 12:30 that night, 3 policemen knocked on our door at our home, and we were told that Mike had been killed instantly by a drunk driver. Now, I had just lost my mother, and the only thing that would come to my mind when those guys were standing there was, why me? God, why me? What part of this program you show me did I not do right? You told me that I needed to make these amends to my mom so that she would know when she was dying that I loved her because she was my mother and not because she was sick. I did that. You told me that I needed to come in here and make these amends to those beautiful 2 children that I had taken away their growing-up years, and I did that. I'd made these amends to that man that I had vowed to love and cherish till death do us part. And now a drunk driver has taken away the sunshine of my life. I won't make it. I don't remember the next 72, 84 hours. I really don't. I know that morning I called my daddy as he was leaving for work, and I said, Daddy, Mike's been killed. And he said, well. Within 15, 20, 30 minutes, our home was filled with AA, Al-Anon, and Alateen, and you never left. You never left. The girls at Bessemer came over to my home in shifts of 3 hours to keep an eye on me. To keep an eye on me. My daughter came up to me at the funeral and she said, Mother, I used to lay awake at night when you would take that last bit of change out of my piggy bank. And you'd get in that car to go get one more bottle of wine, and I'd say, God, let her forget where we live. Or she said, you know, Mom, I'd wish that you'd get in the car and never come home. Or maybe that you would just die in your sleep. Just anything to get you out of my life. She said, I remember thinking as soon as I get out of high school, color me gone because I want no more part of you in my life. And she came up to me and she said, Mom, you will make it. Do you hear me? Mom, you are an AA lady and you will make it. We will make it together. And these girls at Bessemer would come over and stay with me, and I would look at one of them and I'd say, what are you doing here? And she'd say, I don't know. These are my 3 hours. I'd want to go to the bathroom, and there'd be a girl, and I'd say, can I not go in here to the... No. I'm sorry. We were told we were not to let you out of our sight. And the morning of the funeral, I told this girl that I'd give her $50 if she'd let me go in the bathroom and take a shower. And she said, I'm sorry, there's not a price you can pay to go in there by yourself. And so she said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll leave the door half open, and you can go in there and take a shower. And I'll just have it half open so I can watch you. And I said, but I'm not going to do anything. And she said, I know it. So I went in there and I turned on the water, and in just a couple of seconds I was hollering and screaming to the top of my lungs because I had gotten in the shower fully clothed. She came in there and she put her arms around me and she said, now do you see why we can't leave you alone? I said, I won't say anything else. I promise I'll be a good girl. You know, it's been 6 years. It's been 6 years. And people will say to us, how are you handling it? I don't know how we're handling it except one day at a time. Sissy moved out into an apartment after she graduated, and I said, I won't make it if you move out on your own. And she said, Mother, you have raised me to be a very responsible young lady, and I have to leave. I can't stay here and take care of you 24 hours a day. I tried to buy her. I tried to tell her I'd do anything in the world, and she said, Mother, my program tells me that I have to take care of me. I can remember a couple of weeks after Mike's death, Bo called in one day at work, and he said he wasn't going to work, and I didn't understand that. I said, what are you going to do here? And he said, well, I'm taking you over to your sponsor's house. I said, well, it won't do any good. He said, well, it might not for you, but it'll do me good. So he put me in the van and he took me over, and I got out of the van, and this lady was standing there, and she said, "How about a drink, Shirley?" And I said, "I don't want a drink." She said, "Well, come on in. We're going to do a few little things, and we're going to get you turned back around. I've got the coffee pot going, and I've got the big book sitting on my table, and a notepad." And I said, "What are we going to do?" She said, "I'm going to ask you some questions, and when you get through, you can call Bo to come pick you up." And I wanted to know how many questions there were, and she said 3. And I thought, well, this will be fine. I'll answer these 3, and I'll get in my car, and I'll go home. And she said, "Come on in here and have a seat." And she had a line drawn down the middle of this legal pad, and on one side she had written things I'm grateful for. And on the other side she put things I'm not grateful for. And she said, "Question number 1, Shirley, the night Mike died, was he drinking?" I said, "No, ma'am, he was not." And she said, I think I know which column you want to put that under." She said, "Number 2, Shirley, the night Mike died, was he using drugs?" I said, "No, ma'am, he was not using drugs." And she said, "You put that answer up under the other one." And she said, "Now you think very carefully before you answer this one, young lady, because you're going to have to live with this for the rest of your life." And she said, "Shirley, the night Mike was killed, was his mother drinking or using drugs?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I was not." She said, "Honey, you'll be okay, but you won't ever be fine again. You're going to have to allow the people in this program to pick you up and carry you." And I said, "What if I don't want to be carried?" And she said, "Well, we'll keep on carrying you." Well, this particular lady happens to be my aunt. And she has 33 years in this program. And 2 years ago, her husband, Uncle James, had open heart surgery. He came through the surgery fine, but in intensive care he started bleeding and he died. And there were about 8 of us gals sitting around her table. And we had the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we had a coffee pot, and we had that same legal pad with that line drawn down the middle. And I went over to Katie and I said, "Katie, I want to ask you a couple of questions." And she said, "Are you going to sit here for the next 4 hours and do me like I did you when Mike died?" I said, "That's the way this program works." I said, "You're going to have to allow the people in this program to pick you up and carry you, whether you want to be carried or not. I don't know anything unique. I wish that I did. The only thing that I know is that in the last 12 years of my sobriety, there has not been one moment, not one instant that I have ever wanted to take another drink of alcohol. Now, I have to tell you, there have been a couple of times when I did not want to live. There is a difference. But I have not ever wanted to go back from where I came. God has put 3 hunks in my life. He has put my husband, my best friend, my driver, my lover, the father of my children. And you know, he's a pretty good old boy. I think I want to spend the rest of my life with him. The second one is this little blonde-headed, blue-eyed hunk named Mike that lives up in heaven. And I know he would have been just as fine a daddy and just as fine a husband as his father. The third one is a young man who recorded a song some years ago. And it will sum up Shirley Templin when I share one verse of that song with you. This young man's name is Ronnie Millsap. And one of these days, I'm going to get to meet him. This song goes like this. What a difference you made in my life. What a difference you made in my life. You're my sunshine day and night. Oh, what a difference you made in my life. And that's my Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you, and I love you.
was not going to cry while you're up there, but I couldn't. I love you.